I want you to hear this clearly, because it's one of those stories that sounds too shocking to be real. A top Democrat has just been rushed to the hospital after his house exploded. Yes, exploded. This isn't a rumor. It's not clickbait. It's real. And it says everything about how far gone our political climate has become. It happened on a quiet Saturday afternoon in South Carolina. The home of Circuit Court Judge Diane Goodstein, a respected liberal judge who has served since 1998, went up in flames in the gated Jeremy K community on Edisto Beach. Witnesses say the explosion shook the ground. Thick black smoke filled the air as the three-story house burned to the ground in minutes. Inside was her husband, Arnold Goodstein, a former Democratic state senator from the 1970s. When the blast hit, he was trapped. He couldn't reach the door, so he jumped from the first floor to save his life. The fall shattered bones in both legs, his hips, and his feet. Neighbors heard screams. People rushed in, some in kayaks, through the marsh water behind the house, pulling Arnold and two others to safety. One was airlifted to the hospital, the others taken by ambulance. Judge Goodstein wasn't home. She was walking her dogs on the beach. When she came back, her family home, everything she and her husband built over a lifetime, was gone. Just smoke, ash, and wreckage. Now, this is where it gets darker. Authorities from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, are investigating this as a potential act of arson. That means it might not have been an accident. It might have been deliberate, a targeted attack. And that's terrifying, because this isn't just any couple. This is a Democratic judge and her husband, two lifelong public servants, people who spent decades serving their state and standing up for the law. And now their home is in ruins. If this was deliberate, the question becomes, why? Why target them? What message was someone trying to send? And that's where the bigger picture comes in, because what's happening here fits into a growing pattern. Earlier this year, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, another Democrat, was targeted in an arson attack. Before that, a Democratic congressman's office was firebombed. Judges across the country have been receiving death threats after ruling against Trump or his allies. It's becoming a trend, a terrifying one. And when you look at what's been happening in America, it's no coincidence. Trump and his movement have turned anger into a weapon. Every week he calls opponents vermin, traitors, and enemies of the people. His followers take those words seriously. They see Democrats, judges, journalists, even election workers, not as fellow Americans, but as targets. That's why this story matters. It's not just a fire, it's a warning. Because when political speech turns into physical violence, democracy starts to collapse. Think about what it means when judges' homes explode, when politicians are attacked, when families of public officials need bodyguards just to go grocery shopping. This is not how a healthy democracy behaves. This is how societies crumble, not all at once, but piece by piece and through fear and silence. Arnold Goodstein wasn't some radical. Friends describe him as a moderate, someone who believed in fairness and dialogue. He used to say that democracy only survives when people still respect each other enough to disagree peacefully. And now, he's lying in a hospital bed, with broken bones, lucky to be alive. Investigators are still looking for a cause, but fire experts have already said the destruction was total, too sudden, too intense for an ordinary house fire. That's why arson is on the table. If this really was intentional, then we've crossed a line, because targeting a sitting judge's family home, that's not politics. That's terrorism. It's the same tactic used to scare civil rights leaders in the 1960s, the same intimidation used by authoritarian regimes around the world. Destroy the home, destroy the will. And here's the part nobody wants to admit it's working. Judges like Tanya Chutkan and Arthur Engeron, who oversee Trump-related cases, have received death threats so serious they now have 24-hour security. Election workers in Georgia were doxxed and harassed. Members of Congress wear bulletproof vests to campaign events. When did this become normal? When did America decide that politics was worth burning people's houses over? This isn't an isolated tragedy. It's part of a much larger decay. When people stop believing that the system can protect them, they stop trusting the system. And when fear replaces trust, the whole thing breaks down. And make no mistake, the silence from Republican leaders is deafening. When protesters stood outside Brett Kavanaugh's home with candles, the right called it mob rule. But now, when a Democratic judge's house explodes. Not a word, no outrage, no condemnation, just silence. That's hypocrisy in its purest form. Fire investigators will tell you arson is rarely just about fire. It's about control fear and messages. It's about power. That's what this feels like, a message. A warning to anyone who dares to stand against the movement Trump built. Because the people who fan these flames, the politicians, the pundits, the influencers, they know exactly what they're doing. They create the anger. They fuel it. And then when violence happens, they look away and say, "We had nothing to do with it." But they did. Every word, every post, every rally chant that calls opponents enemies contributes to this culture of hate. And this is the result. A judge barely survives. A Democrat lies in a hospital bed. A home is turned to ash. Let's call it what it is: domestic political terrorism. It's meant to send fear through the ranks of those who still believe in democracy. It's meant to make people think twice before speaking, before ruling, before voting. And it's happening right now on American soil. What makes it worse is how fast the story disappeared from mainstream headlines. Just a few hours of coverage, and then silence. No major outrage cycle, no deep investigations, no White House statement. That's how desensitized we've become to political violence. But we can't look away from this one. Because this isn't just about the Goodsteins. It's about every person who stands up to power and now wonders, could this happen to me? If you think that's paranoia, look at the pattern. From January 6th, to the hammer attack on Paul Pelosi, to threats against election workers, to arson at political offices, it's all connected. Each act chips away at the foundation of democratic life. And here's the thing about democracy. It doesn't die in one dramatic moment. It dies quietly when people stop caring. When we normalize the unacceptable. When we say, that's just how things are now. We cannot let that happen. Because if we do, then everything. The Goodsteins, and people like them, stood for fairness, law, public service becomes meaningless. What happened on Edisto Beach should shake this country awake. It should make us ask hard questions about who we are and where we're heading. Are we still a nation that believes in justice? Or are we becoming a nation ruled by fear and fire? Because if political violence becomes just another headline, then there's no democracy left to defend. So let's be clear. The Goodstein fire is not just a tragedy. It's a symbol. It shows what happens when anger is left unchecked, when propaganda replaces truth, when politicians exploit division instead of healing it. Judge Diane Goodstein has spent more than 2 decades upholding the law. Now the same system she served needs to protect her. Her husband, Arnold, spent his life believing in democracy. Now that democracy needs to believe in him. If we let this story fade, if we stop demanding answers, then the people who lit this fire, literally or metaphorically, win. So, to everyone watching, don't let this vanish into the news cycle. Talk about it. Share it. Demand accountability. Demand justice. Because silence is complicity. Every time a voice goes quiet out of fear, democracy loses another heartbeat. So, keep speaking. Keep watching. Keep shining light where others want darkness. Because the only way we stop this descent is together. The Goodsteins survived the flames. But the question now is, will our democracy? Because awareness is power, and right now, power belongs to those who refuse to stay silent.